All right, so it's recording.
Okay.
It's July 23rd, 2012, and it's Jared and Grandpa sitting here recording some stories. I think what we'll probably do is just start off by saying, "Hi, Grandpa."
Hey, Jared, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing pretty good. I was wondering if you could just start off by telling us, I think maybe because tonight we only have time probably for the first part of your life. So, what are some of your earliest memories? And maybe you could even start out with telling us a little bit about your mom and dad and where you're at.
Well, see, I was born in the state of Maine. I was the first one to be born in a hospital. Everybody else was born at home, you know. I remember I was told that when they brought me into my mother's room, she said, "Who's that monkey?" She said, "Who's that monkey?" So, anyway, I never did get carried with that name. But I was the firstborn son, second oldest. I had a sister older than me who's not living anymore. I lived with my grandparents until I was about 12 or 13 years old. Most of the time with them, and some off and on with my mother and father because of World War II and stuff like that. And my best years, my teen years, were living on the farm.
Was that your grandparents' farm?
My grandparents' farm.
So what are some of your earliest memories of your grandpa and grandma?
My grandma and grandma Wells. My grandfather was a painter, paper hanger, like wallpaper and stuff like that. He taught me how to paint when I was a kid. My grandmother Wells, was a beautiful lady, a very godly lady. And she said as long as I stayed with him, I had to go to church. And and then at nighttime, my favorite thing in the farm was at nighttime. She would take me upstairs. We didn't have no lights, no running water.
Yeah.
So-
What did the farm look like? Like, how big was it?
We had 4 cows, and a horse, chickens, and it was in the state of Maine, so we gathered up maple syrup, sap from the trees every day, took them down in the woods, and there was a vat about as big around as that table over there that was cooking all the time. So we dumped the sap in the vat, and it took 33 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of maple syrup. And so we gathered it every morning, and then we go out and tap the trees, and it was a fun time. We had a horse. I did the haying, and I did all the cutting of the hay and raking it up.
And who would go with you? How many people would go out when you?
Just me.
Just you?
Just me.
By yourself?
By myself. And my horse had hay fever. And you'd be out there and you'd get about halfway down and he'd fall on his stomach. He'd collapse. So you'd sit there and wait, and then he'd finally get his breath back. And we'd go again until he fell down again. So, yeah. I told my grandfather, I said, "Papa," I said, "why don't you get a tractor? This dumb horse is going to kill me." And he just laughed. Then we had 4 cows that I had to milk every day by hand. And when I finally left the farm, he got an automatic milker. I said, "Thanks a lot, Grandpa." But anyway, my nighttime was my grandmother taking the lantern up to bed with me and getting into a
Sorry, I was afraid of the sound.
getting in old feather bed. Oh man, you just sink in that thing, and you lay up, and she'd cover you up, and she'd kiss you goodnight, and I'll never forget it.
So you said that you would go out. How many days a week would you do the chores like that?
7 days a week.
Yeah, even on Sunday.
Yeah, you had to.
And you started to say that she made you go to church on Sunday.
Yep, I did the chores early in the morning, and it was about 7 miles to town, and so we went to the old Congregational Church in Hollowell. That's where I was raised, in Hollowell, Maine, and so even when I got older, and I was living at home, I'd call my grandmother and ask her if I could go spend the weekend. Remember, you got to go to church. And I walked by her house every day to go to school. When they sold the farm and they went into the city because they was getting too old to take care of the farm. And no matter what, it rubbed off on me, but it didn't stay with me. And so.
What do you remember of those first times going to church? Like, if you could just kind of describe it, like walking in and your feelings.
I had a Sunday school teacher
Mm-hmm.
named Harvard Gray, and he was a very godly man. We would, in Sunday school class, we would do Bible study, and we'd have a contest would last for the beginning to the end of the month. That whoever did the most Bible verses, they took us out to dinner once a month.
Where at?
In a restaurant. We didn't have a hamburger joints like you got today. We never had that. So he'd take us down to the restaurant. But I never failed. There was always the same three or four of us, the same ones every month. And finally, he said he had to put a stop to it because the other kids wouldn't getting the chance either. So, but going to church then was different than it is today. Today, church is not observed. It's not. When you go to church back then, it's like you stand walking into God's house. It was a holy place. Everything was put in its place, and everything was. But today, you go to church, kids running and hooting and hollering and all, and not that reverent. And so that was my beginning of church and Sunday school, was in God's house. And as I got older, when I went, I got to ring the bell. Out of the belfry, you had a big bell up there, and I got to ring it.
When did they ring it?
They rang it every Sunday morning. People know church was open, and just before church would start. So.
And how did you get to church and back? Did you guys have a car?
Oh, my grandfather, he wasn't a churchgoer. It was a game between him and my grandmother. They played. I mean, they were in their late 80s, early 90s when they died. But it was always a game for them. I remember Grandpa liked to have a beer and a cigarette. And and she knew he smoked because he had pipe and tobacco in the front room. And he said, "Well, I got to go check on the cows or something." She knew he was going to go and have a cigarette and a beer. It was a game. And so, that's the way it went for 60 years. And it was fun. I remember my grandfather had a big bowl where he kept his pipes, and he had a tobacco thing. And I don't know if I get what you... whatever it is, whatever they put tobacco in. And Grandma said, "That pipes are starting to stink." So now you got to remember he had some fancy pipes, and you don't do what she did. She put them in soap and water, and my grandfather come home. I remember he got so mad he had to throw all of his pipes away because she had put them in soap and water, and so it took all the flavor out of it, the pipe, all the age. So he had to start all over again. And I only remember him having one more pipe, and that was one like Sherlock Holmes. And when I started smoking when I was a kid, I emulated him with that kind of a pipe. And